Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't recognise me, my name is Jo. We've been members of RBC for just under 20 years, and at the beginning of this year, we left to follow God's call on our life somewhere else. So we are visitors here today as well. I only have one note in my pocket. I'm not as organised as Karen. This didn't bode me well last week when I did this at Deep Wells, because I was given a 10-minute slot and I spoke for nearly half an hour, which you might laugh at. But if you want to know how to preach a half-an-hour sermon in just under 15 minutes, speak to Mark later. I've tweaked it. You're all right. So my one note is a Bible scripture, because I'm just rubbish at remembering Bible scriptures. I really am. I've tried, but I'm really rubbish. So Christ's light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1:5. And my story is all about hope. So my journey started when I was 8. I come from a non-Christian household. My mum was an ex-Catholic, went to a Catholic school, but didn't really kind of gel with it. My dad was an ex-miner with anxiety issues and alcohol dependency. And so life was up and down a lot. You know, there was a lot of love in my house, but it was up and down a lot. Sometimes living with Dad was like living with Jethro on a very, very, very bad day. But at 8 years old, my journey began. We moved to the Lizard, and a school friend said to me, "Do you know, if you go to Sunday school, they'll give you sweeties." And at 8 years old, that was it. That was enough to get me to Sunday school. So I started going, and initially I did just go for the sweets. But even then, I felt a need to be there. And our Sunday school at that time was before the service. So they would teach us, send us home, and then they would do the main service. But on multiple occasions, I would find myself just sat in a pew at the back for the service, just because I wanted to listen. Didn't understand at all what they were saying, but I just knew I needed to be there. And then we moved to another village when I was 11, and for a little bit, that's where my journey ended. I do remember one distinct conversation I had with God at the time, which I didn't know at the time was God, until much later, where he pointed out to me in no uncertain terms which chap I was going to marry, and I have been married to him for 21 years now. So that was at 11, a bit of a revelation. But after that, my life went a bit downhill. My granddad passed away when I was 12, and we were very, very close. I had some mental health issues about it all, some anxieties. And children can be really cruel, can't they? If you show a weakness, they can pounce on it. So that led to a year of verbal and physical bullying. And at the end of that year, when I was 13, with no hope, and with no Jesus, I felt the only way that I could fix things was to not be here anymore. So I took an overdose and I ended up in hospital. I came through that, obviously, and continued my life, as it were. And it wasn't until Mark and I got married, really, that I made a connection again with God. Mark's stepmom, who was probably quite disappointed that Mark had married me because I wasn't a Christian, kept talking to me about the love of Jesus, and she would talk and talk and talk, and actually I was quite open to it. I was really interested. I was very curious, so I would listen. And then one day when Mark was away, he was in the Navy at the time, and I was just sat on my bed on my own. I felt the urge to actually invite Jesus into my life, and there and then on my own I did. And you can't describe the feeling that you have when that happens. I know that my face ached so much from smiling. I had to get onto the phone to phone my mother-in-law and say, "This is what's happened, I'm so excited." I had to wait for Mark to phone me from the ship that he was on, and tell him about it. And then the first thing I wanted to do, I needed to find a church. I was desperate to find a church. So we'd visited another church in Redruth, and lovely, lovely people, but I just knew that wasn't where we needed to be. So I went to the bookshop. There was a Christian bookshop up the road at the time, and I said, can you help me? I need somewhere to go. And they said, "Oh, you need to phone Anne." So I phoned Anne, and Anne was lovely. And Anne said, "Oh, tomorrow, Tuesday, we have a coffee morning. come to the coffee morning and see us. And I went down, and as soon as I came in, as soon as I walked in the building, I knew I was home. That's the only way I can describe it, is that this was my home. And it has been for many, many, many years. And you guys are just my family, and families come and go, and we've seen different faces, but this will always be my home. And we've had lots of good times here. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the struggles that I've had, because it hasn't always been easy. You don't get saved into something and then the rest of your life is just everything goes right. That's just not how it happens. Whether we're Christians, whether we're non-Christians, we're going to face challenges, and that's just life. That's just what it is. So my first big struggle came when I was pregnant with Sophie. And I was on crutches for a little bit for an illness that they said was pregnancy related, but later on turned out that it wasn't at all. It was just, these are the symptoms you've got, that's the disease you must have. After she was born, I got very, very sick. I was on crutches. I was on 16 tablets a day, some quite hefty ones, diazepam, amitriptyline, all sorts. I had 2 small children, and I wasn't mentally there a lot of the time because I had so much going on in my system. I developed a reactive arthritis, so joints that I didn't even know I had swelled up. I couldn't hold my children's hands because my fingers had swelled up like sausages, and they were that painful. Couldn't play with them. I wasn't mothering them at all. It was a really hard time in my life. And then on top of that, my old friend mental health appeared, and I developed a depression and panic attacks. The devil had his grip on me, and he was working hard to make sure that I veered off my path. And for a while, it looked like it was working. Came to a point I couldn't even come into this building, because every time I walked past or anywhere near, I just had panic attacks. So we disappeared for a little while. And then I guess I hit a point where I'd been going to consultants for about 2 years, and they'd done x-rays and they'd done blood tests and they'd done all these things. And then I finally had an MRI, and they diagnosed a disc disease. And at 22, they said to me, and I'll never forget these words, they said, "There isn't anything we can do for you. You are going to end up in a wheelchair." And that shock of that was where I found my fight, because I was ready to not let that happen. I knew that we had a God who was stronger than that, and that with God all things are possible. So that day I made a choice that I was going to follow God, and I was going to rededicate my life to God, and I was going to do whatever I could to get back on track. And the first thing he did was he healed me from my depression and my anxiety. The mind is such a powerful weapon. You can use it for good and you can use it for bad. And if your mind isn't right, then nothing else is going to be right. So God started there. He fixed my mind. And I was able to come back to a loving family who welcomed me with open arms. And that was just amazing. The support and love I got from people here just overwhelmed me. And then God healed me from my sickness. Completely, absolutely, 100%. I stopped all my tablets. I haven't taken any tablets in, how old am I? I don't know, 17, 18 years. I'm not in a wheelchair. I have no pain. I haven't had any pain for a very long time. I can do things that I shouldn't be able to do. But God is bigger than my weakness. God is bigger than my illness. God is bigger than anything that I can even possibly try and imagine. And my healing is in him, and I'm really, really thankful for that. And a couple of things I want to mention, because life throws you something, and then you fix that, or God fixes that, and then sooner or later something else will come along, another hurdle will come along, and then another one, and so not long after that, I suffered a miscarriage. And if anyone's had a miscarriage, you know how utterly devastating that is. And I was not gracious. I was not gracious at all. I locked myself in my room and I screamed at God for 2 days, and I was cross with him. I'd kind of not forgotten my healing, But I needed to vent at him, and I think he knew where I was. And so I was cross for a few days, and I was sad. And I did something I'm not proud of. I told God, because we tell God what to do, don't we? I told God to fix it. And I don't recommend you do that. But I said to God, you need to fix this by the time my child should have been born. I was that broken. I was that hurt. I was demanding things from God that I had no right to demand from him. And I said, this is the date. This is the date I want it fixed by. And then I picked myself off and I dusted myself down and we carried on and we did beach missions and we got busy and life was okay. Life was fine. Life was great. And then on the day that my baby should have been born, I very unexpectedly found out I was pregnant with Gabe on the exact day that child should have been born. So God, even in my weakness, even when I was failing him, he was honouring and he was gracious and he was merciful. And of course he had a sense of humour because much like your child, Karen, he was an awful baby. I love him to bits, I do, but I've often joked that if he was my first, he would have been my last. He literally cried for 2 years. He hated everyone apart from me. But no, he's lovely. He's a lovely, lovely boy, and I'm really super blessed to have him. And then fast forward, even to last year, I went through perhaps even harder, definitely even harder than that. I lost my mum last year, and it was a very quick and sudden illness we weren't expecting. And she came to live with me for 2 months, and I nursed her while she died. And it broke me. It does. If anyone's nursed someone they love really very, very, very much, they'll know how hard it is to give your heart and your soul knowing what the outcome is going to be. So it was tough. It was really tough. And I've had days where I've curled up in a ball and stayed in my bed. And I've had days where I've opened the door and I've walked and walked for miles because that's what I need to do. But it didn't break me. It hasn't broken me like I have been broken in the past, because that whole time God was my strength and God was holding me. And he never let me go. Even if I couldn't feel it, even if I felt that I was being overwhelmed and that the burden was too big for me to carry, I know that he was with me carrying me. I know he was there. And I guess it's really changed my outlook. My mum was only 20 years older than I am. I work with colleagues who are older than my mum was. And I remember her saying to me before she died that she wasn't afraid of dying. I believe she'd accepted God. We'd had lots of conversations, and she knew people in this church were praying for her, and she told me that she felt comforted by that. So I believe that she had that connection there before she died. But she said to me, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of what I'm leaving behind. And that really kind of, it struck a note in me. It made me realise that we have to live every day like it's your last. You have to grab chances where you can. Don't be afraid. Don't let fear come in and destroy any chances that you've got of making progress or taking a step for God. And, we made big steps at the beginning of this year, which are exciting and frightening. But who knows how long we've got, Today could be your last day to tell someone about Jesus. What if it is, What if you miss that opportunity because you're afraid? I am terrified standing up here right now. I'm so scared. I'm not a public speaker. I leave that to Mark. I like to sit down there and watch him. But I've learned this year that actually you can't let life slip you by. You can't be afraid. You've got to go out there and you've got to stand up and be counted for God. And that it doesn't matter whatever you are facing today, whatever struggle, whether it's mental health, whether it's depression, whether it's grief or loss, whatever you're facing, whether it's illness, that God is bigger than all of that. Whatever you are facing today, God could fix tomorrow. And your tomorrow, like my tomorrow was 2 years when I was poorly, and that seemed a long time. But I thank God for every one of those days of those 2 years, because I've never forgotten how it feels to feel that low and to feel that dependent and to feel that frightened. And now I can use that to help other people, I hope, to share my story. So yeah, don't let how you are feeling today, don't let that rule over your life, because we have someone who is bigger than all of that. We do. Our God is great. He loves you and he wants the best for you. And all you have to do is choose. Choose him. Choose God. Every day I'll choose to choose him. Thank you.